All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of our college preparation series sessions. So today we're going to be talking about kind of the current landscape of higher ed and trends in enrollment and all of that good stuff. And so we have some really great panelists here to share with us that we're super excited about. But we'll start with just kind of quick introductions and then kind of laying out what this session is going to look like. So my name is Samantha Jackson. I am one of the career readiness consultants here at Kent ISD.
And I am
And Catherine and I also both have worked previously in higher ed, Catherine as an admissions counselor and myself in career services, and also have worked in, Catherine worked in college access work. So this is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and we're super excited to be able to lead this series for you all, and particularly to lead this session today. All right, so just a little bit about what our office does for those who aren't familiar. We do have folks from around the state on with us today, but for those who are in Kent County here, the Career Readiness Department at the ISD, we have 4 career readiness consultants, and each of us works with specific school districts within the county. So on the top, we kind of have our, more traditional public schools. On the bottom, we have other schools we support, primarily charter schools. We do support all schools in the county, though. So if you're with one of our private or parochial schools, we do also support you. So if you don't see your name on here, please feel free to reach out to one of us, and we are happy to support you as well. But just kind of in general, the work that we do, we provide a lot of professional development, primarily to counselors, but educators in general. And we also work with schools on really creating a K through 12 career plan for students. So part of that is working with educational development plans. We help connect schools to industry through guest speakers and industry tours and career fairs and panels and things like that. And also helping to develop career readiness resources or curating resources that are out there. All right, so we're gonna really just jump right in here. So just kind of the outline for today's session. We are going to be kind of bouncing back and forth. So we asked you all about some specific topics. And so we're going to be, Catherine is going to be sharing some kind of key points about those topics. And then we'll have 1 or 2 questions for each of those topics. And then we'll kind of bounce back and forth just because each one is kind of distinct. And then at the end, we'll have time for kind of open Q&A. And then we'll do some wrap up. So, and we will let all of our panelists introduce themselves. Actually, we'll do that here now before we get into the first key point. So we'll just go straight down the list here. If you want to go ahead first, Selena.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Selena. I've been at GRCC for about 6 years. And my main job is as a recruiter around the Grand Rapids area. And then I also am our PDSO, so I handle all international admissions at the college.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Terry Gilbert. Pleasure serving as one of our associate directors at Purdue. I've been at Purdue. This is actually my second stint, and in total about 10 years. And my primary role is to oversee Purdue's national recruitment initiatives.
Morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay Hanson. I'm the Director of Admissions at Aquinas College. I'm an alum of Aquinas, and I've been doing admissions basically since I graduated, so for about 12 years. And I've been full-time. I'm going on my 10th year here, and I do have a very, very small territory. I work with just a handful of Grand Rapids schools, but then I supervise our admissions counselors, and I also plan a lot of our big kind of recruitment events on campus. And excited to chat with everybody today.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Tom Hampton, and I'm a regional admissions manager with Michigan Tech, and I've been there for about 12 years now. And I've got a lot of West Michigan, Grand Rapids, the greater Grand Rapids area. That's where I would say most of my students come from. And I look forward to answering some questions today.
All right, hopefully now everybody can hear me a little bit better, but I'm Catherine Goldberg, also career readiness consultant, as you saw on the slides. As Samantha mentioned, the format is we're going to kind of do some key points, kind of get the lay of the land before then we open up the conversation. So our first topic is admissions applications and enrollment trends. So just to kind of give some general information, the latest national data that we have is from 2021. And so the general sense across the country is about 62% of high school completers are immediately enrolling in college. And that breaks down to 43% immediately enrolling in a traditional 4-year school, 19% enrolling in a 2-year school. So I think it's just always helpful to kind of understand the national perspective. We'll zoom in a little bit more in Michigan as we go through today's conversation. And then one of the big conversations, one of the hot topics in the world of enrollment management is this idea of this enrollment cliff. And you may have heard it in other ways as we think about career trajectories as well. You may have heard a lot that like there's so many people that are going to be retiring. There's so many careers within Michigan that are really ramping up recruitment efforts. And it's kind of boiling down to the same idea, which is that given declining birth rates in the US, we anticipate a pretty significant decline in the number of students who will be enrolling in college beginning in the class of 2025. So that would be your current junior. That would be your current juniors for high school counselors. And then kind of zooming in a little bit more here to Michigan, just one big thing to be aware of, if you have not already heard this news in the state of Michigan, there is the Michigan Assured Admissions Pact. So 10 state universities that said if you have a 3.0 and above for a high school GPA, you will be accepted. So I think a big part of that is also to help with those fears or those worries of, am I going to have a home after high school in terms of college? We as trained professionals all know that they will, but it's always helpful to be able to have those data points. Obviously, fine print is going to matter. Selective programs may still have additional requirements, but we'll share out some information after the session so you can see those 10 universities as well. And then just thinking about that enrollment cliff, we know the national picture, but it's every area within the country does not react the same way, right? So generally speaking, the South and the West are anticipated to have smaller declines in enrollment, where the Northeast and the Midwest are anticipated to have larger declines. So they're anticipating a 15% decline of students enrolling in college from the state of Michigan. So those are just some recent data points, some things to be aware of as you think about admissions application and enrollment trends. And then I will turn it over to Samantha, who will facilitate our questions.
Yes, so our first, sorry. Oops. Thank you. So our first couple questions for our panelists dealing with just general admissions applications and enrollment trends. And we can just start with our friends on the screen here at GRCC. So Selena, if you want to start, our first question is, so we often hear about this concept of the enrollment cliff. And then we also know that COVID further interrupted enrollment trends in higher education. So what did you see at your institution last year in terms of applicant and enrollment numbers? What do you anticipate for this year, next year?
Yeah, so I mean, GRCC is obviously a 2-year college compared to my friends here on the panel as well. So, we get to tap into a lot of different kinds of students. So I think our trends are maybe slightly different. But obviously last year we've been seeing some very slow climbs back from the pandemic. Last year was a little bit better. This year was better, which was very nice. And so we are able to of course, tap into our traditional students coming straight from high school. But of course, the state has been doing a lot of amazing things to get adult students back to school as well. And of course, two-year colleges are benefiting from that. So we're seeing a lot of uptick in adult students and things like that. So I'm hoping next year will be, a good thing, because we can kind of start, getting into some of those other audiences and whatnot. But we're really kind of just moving on to question 2, if I can, adapting. Of course, post-COVID, we know a lot of students want to do online classes and fully online programs, and we're slowly getting there. We don't have a ton of fully online programs that students can do just yet, but we have over half of our classes that we're able to offer, in some sort of online format. So I think that's something that we're seeing a lot, is a lot of students want that flexibility, of course. So I think we're just trying to keep our ear to the ground and listening to what students want. And I think, post COVID, it's a little bit easier to try new things, and experiment a little bit and see, we don't have to keep doing everything the same way as we've always done. We can work together more often and, get these students to where they want to be, whether they start with us and then come to you all, or come to you all first, then come to us, whatever that, process and pathway might be for them. So.
Great, thank you. And yes, please do answer question 2, I guess, as well. They do go hand in hand. So how is your institution adapting or changing to meet the needs of students, especially post-COVID? So Lindsay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. That's such a great point too, Selena, right? We got to just meet everybody where they're at and listen to them. And I think I will just say that here at Aquinas, we are very fortunate enough that we have been able to fill our open positions, which has been really great. And I think we've been seeing the fruits of that. We are up in our applications by over 20% this year, which is really kind of crazy and unheard of, but it's just further proof that the more people you have on the road and promoting your school, I mean, the more people are going to want to be interested in your school and show you that by applying. So, but I think another thing that we have done to change, kind of going into the question 2, we have implemented, so we've been talking for about a year and a half about a 1 class at a time block model. There are 3 colleges in the country that are doing this. Colorado College, and they've been doing it for the longest, I think like close to 50 years or something along those lines. Cornell College in Iowa has been doing this for I think like 20 to 30. And then Montana Western has been doing it. They're the newest one. I think they've been doing it for about 10 years or so, maybe a little less. But essentially, we are piloting for fall 2023 a 1 class at a time block model, where instead of students taking 4 to 5 classes all at the same time, they will be taking 1 class every single day for 3.5 weeks. And then at the end of the 3.5 weeks, they get a 4-day weekend, and then they'll start the next class. All of our classes are pretty much all of our classes are worth 4 credits. So they are still taking that 16 credit kind of middle limit. But they're just taking things 1 at a time. And like Selena said, we were able to experiment a little bit, for lack of a better term, in this post-COVID world. What are we, let's re-look at the academic structure and let's try something a little different. So we have 80 students in this pilot program right now, and they are in their 3rd block. And honestly, the feedback we've been getting has been really, really positive. And we are piloting it for fall 2024. We already know we're going to do the same kind of pilot program for fall 2024. And then we are really listening to our students. We're listening to our faculty too, right? I mean, they are going to have to change how they do things as well. So we want to listen to everybody in this. So faculty will end up making the ultimate decision because we do want to put it in their hands. And so there's a lot. So even in my talking to, juniors right now, fall of 2025 class, I'm kind of saying like, I'm not really sure what it'll look like for them, because We could all be doing block. None of us be doing block. We could be doing another pilot program. So things like that are still a little up in the air, which I know is not great for college students. I do understand that, but we've been able to really kind of talk through the benefits of this one class at a time block model. It's going to allow for students to have a lot more flexibility. 9 to noon, they're in class. They are nowhere else but class. Then noon to 9 the next day, they have for practice, rehearsal, on or off campus jobs. They're also really going to focus in on one thing at a time. It's not meant to be 3-hour lectures every single day. So we're expanding even more on our promise for experiential learning. They're going to go do field trips. There's even a theater professor who has said, if we do go to this full time, he has a plan for a theater class where a full week they go to New York and they just are going to often on Broadway shows, which I would absolutely love to be a part of. I've said I could be a chaperone if needed. But it's just meant to really dive a lot deeper because you're only focused in on that one thing at a time. And it inherently builds in mental health breaks for our students. Every 3.5 weeks, they get a 4-day weekend before they start their next class. So I don't want to ramble on too much longer, but it is just something that we're piloting and we're seeing if it works. And we've just had some really, really great responses to it from our students and our faculty. And we will continue to kind of, like I said, do the pilot program for the rest of this year and do the pilot program for next year. But this is just a really great time to be able to do some different things. And that's one thing that we're trying out.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm so glad you shared about that. It's such a unique take and way that you've adapted to the needs of students. Tom.
Yeah, at Michigan Tech, we've been fortunate enough too that we haven't.
I think we lost you, Tom.
Should I jump in while Tom is maybe getting this technology?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay,
Terry.
just to not have dead space. Sorry. First of all, I want to say, Lindsay, that sounds really cool. That what you're doing in Aquinas. Like, I'm already like, I'm sorry, I'm getting into like the academic pedagogy and all this other stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, all the different options. That's really cool. So that's really interesting. But so yeah, so with regard to Purdue's enrollment and applications, we recognize we're very fortunate, much like Aquinas, and I'm sure what Tom will be able to share with Michigan Tech. So while and the enrollment cliff is definitely real. I mean, the numbers are there to prove it. Our application numbers have every year gone up, and candidly, that's not something that we really take pride in. We're a public land grant institution built upon access. It's hard to be accessible when you're receiving applications for a very finite number of spaces. So just to answer the question directly, we received record number of applications last year. The 2 years prior to that, we had record enrollment. So I know that doesn't necessarily mean last year, and so we were capped this past year because we want the student experience to stay the same. So we did cap our enrollment at 9,200, and we were fortunately able to meet that. We expect the same this year. If our early action applications are any indication, we will probably be right around the same number where we were last year. Again, to give quantitative figures to that, we're right around 73,000 applications. We probably will go maybe a little bit higher this coming year. So, I mean, we'll see. Relative to this is kind of like one of my roles is just kind of forecast and project and seeing kind of where we are and where we'll be in a couple of years. But if trends remain the same while the number of students in the pool are maybe lowering, what we've seen and what I'm sure many institutions see and is the number of schools to which they're applying is increasing. So, I mean, we're a common application exclusive school. So this is kind of like common app exclusive stuff. But I want to say last year, there was a 10% increase in the number of average applications from a student. And before that, during the COVID years, I'm sure that was largely driven by test optional policies, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later on. That number I think rose 20%. So while the number of students, the pool is shrinking, the number of schools to which they're applying is increasing on average. And so what that indicates for us is that we're going to continue to have more and more applications because they're going to get more and more selective. Students are going to apply to more and more schools to be able to kind of beat that system. And I don't know if those aren't necessarily a good thing, but the numbers are the numbers. And so we're doing as best as we can to expand our capacities as best as we possibly can in anticipation for that interest. With respect to the second question and kind of post-COVID, I really wish I had something cool to be able to talk about like Lindsay did. I don't. That's why I'm so interested. But Purdue was, we took some heat nationally, if I can be candid. We were very aggressive post-COVID in getting students back to school. We never embraced a fully or partially online model or hybrid model. We had a lot of things in place. We expanded the number of places our students were studying and taking classes to be able to accommodate for like social distancing and things like that. And so that's kind of maintained in the years after. Well, I don't know that we'll ever be maybe post-COVID, but post-pandemic, the years after that has happened. And so kind of that same spirit of doing everything we can to maintain kind of like the academic classroom experience that students knew prior to the pandemic. So I don't have anything cool to say, to be honest with you, but I will always keep the health of our students in mind, and especially the mental health of our students. I know that has expanded critically. And things happen. Students need that type of support on campus, and I will say in the last 3 years that has significantly expanded their access to mental and emotional health resources.
Thank you, Terry. And I do think that something you said is a really important point to make, that we are actually seeing like the trend has been that we're seeing more applications at the large public institutions, and typically where we're seeing the greatest decline based on the changing demographic is the kind of more regional institutions and small privates. But he sounds like Aquinas has been able to escape that a little bit. But that is where we're kind of seeing that trend, is large the large publics are kind of staying pretty consistent. The more regional, smaller publics and small privates are feeling a lot more of the lower application numbers. All right, I think we have Tom back with us now.
Yep, thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks, Tom.
I think what Terry was talking about, we're going through some of those same things where we see so many students applying to so many schools now. And a couple of years ago, we switched to the Common App in addition to our own application as well. So we saw about 27% increase in apps, which is crazy from one year to the next. But then this year, we're also up from week 11 compared to last year, about 5% already. So we're expecting to see more and more apps each year. And that makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out who's really interested. So we do a lot of different things at Michigan Tech during the year, virtually and in person, to really help us figure out who those students are. So we're in a growth model right now. And a few years ago, from then to probably another about 10 years, we want to grow about 1,000 students total in measured growth. So we really haven't witnessed too much with the enrollment cliff so far. We know it's coming. We've been talking about it for probably 8 years or so now. And we know that we have to get creative with things, and we have been doing that. We're also kind of unique in that we're in state, but we're also right above Wisconsin and close to Minnesota. And our Illinois students drive less of a distance to get to Michigan Tech than our students from Grand Rapids do. So it's kind of a unique mix at Michigan Tech. The other thing too is that we are a STEM focused school. So our students, they're really matched up well with what industry is demanding right now. So I think that by having almost all STEM programs, and even the ones that aren't with us, they have a STEM feeling to them, like psychology or anthropology. So it's just kind of a different place. So we've been fortunate enough to really have applications increase. It's kind of a double-edged sword, but our enrollment numbers have been, really well lately as well, especially after COVID. And out of the last 4 years, we had 3 of our best classes since the 1980s, something like that. So by us continuing on with our focus on STEM and being agile, we're small enough and big enough that we can really work with industry and really work well with our students to get them ready for what the careers are out there, especially in those STEM fields. With question 2, I think that with COVID, it really forced a lot of schools, including us, to really ramp up our efforts with accommodating students. Mental health is a really big thing. Our students can get free virtual counseling now. Before they had free counseling on campus, so that's a thing that we've added with benefits for students. I think that with us, it never made a whole lot of sense to do online very much. And because of that, and our students really want that in-class experience, we really only went to online and hybrid learning when we had to with COVID, and then we moved back. So I guess the biggest thing we've done to our students and for what they like is that we brought everything back to the way it kind of was, where it's really focused on being together in groups, working in labs, those kinds of things. So while we do have some online classes, we probably have more than we used to. It really is the biggest thing, moving back to how we offered things in person before COVID. And I think that's just been our model. So I think that it's really important to keep focusing on those mental health issues. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I've noticed as far as changes in the way that we've done things before. And I mentioned accommodations, and we've had more opportunities for students to bring support animals with them. Before it was just, no, we don't have any animals on campus. So there's some little things that are changes compared to what we had before COVID.
All right, we are going to move to topic number 2. So this is the topic we're discussing is the Supreme Court case that was ruled in June that banned the use of race in college admissions. So Samantha and I have been attending some national conversations around this, and then also some like webinars and things. And I think one of the big highlights here is that the case did not ban affirmative action nationally. It just banned the use of race in the admissions process. So what that means varies institution by institution, state by state, given that in some ways in Michigan, this doesn't change a whole lot, given that there was a state ban on the use of affirmative action since 2006 at state universities. So just a piece of context is knowing sort of what's happening nationally and then what's happening within our state. So kind of the big question that is often asked, or that we have been hearing over and over again, is should students share their race and ethnicity? So in the past, for example, on the Common App, you'd have the question where a student, it was always optional, it is remaining optional, but where a student could check the boxes for how they identify in terms of race and ethnicity. And so counselors and students are wondering, like, should I just not even touch that box anymore? And the information we want to share here is that nationally, colleges may suppress that information, which means that students will still see it as an option on the Common App, but when an admissions officer opens up the Common App to review the file, those questions would not appear in their file review. So that's what we mean by suppress it. Students would fill it out, but the admissions officer would not be able to see it when they review the application. If the student still checks those boxes off, the information can be still used for recruitment efforts after the student has been accepted. So if you have a student whose identity makes them eligible for specific scholarships, bridge programs, supports, affinity groups, and all of that, the use of race and ethnicity can still be used for those efforts. So that's why a college might suppress the information in the application process, but still have it be useful in their yield or sort of that entire process that a student goes through. happy to keep reiterating that later in a question and answer, just to the nuances, the legalese, and all of that there. Also, big headline here, it's a student's choice, right? So we as professionals know that that is a really important part of this, is a student's decision and autonomy in making that decision and whether or not they want to report it. I just want to make sure everybody feels like they have the information there. Obviously, then people are like, okay, the role of the essay is going to become that much more important. And so some colleges have added essay questions to be able to better understand how a student's identity has shaped their lived experience. We also have the increase of AI, ChatGPT, and some questions around how do you assess an essay for a student's actual personal effort on the essay, now that we have some additional tools for that. So, you know, one step forward, one step back, maybe. But the essay is a very important opportunity for students to be able to share their story, share their lived experience, and provide some of that context if they feel like now having that race and ethnicity information suppressed eliminates that opportunity. One of the best quotes that I've heard recently is that your essay will walk into rooms that your feet will never touch. It came from a professional in Texas that we heard speak, and just the power of a student's words in their essay and who will be reading those. And then to bring it home into Michigan, so we know affirmative action had been banned since 2006. I thought this was an interesting point. We often hear the most about the impact of that at state institutions such as University of Michigan, where the percentage of incoming students who identify as Black decreased from 2006 to 2021. But another data point, Michigan State, it was up ever so slightly. Eastern Michigan also up ever so slightly. Those data come from Bridge, Michigan. Just some context to understand that we are in a slightly different world in the admissions process nationally. So I think that's where I'll pause there on the key facts. So then we have one question for our panelists, and I'll turn it over to Samantha.
Yes, and again, understanding that state universities in Michigan have not been able to use this since 2006 anyway, but did just want to provide opportunity for our panelists. Do you anticipate any significant shifts in how you review applications post this ruling? If so, what are they? If not, that is also totally fine. And I believe here we have, I believe this is the beautiful campus of Michigan Tech. Tom, you want to go first?
It is, thank you. For us, this ruling hasn't really changed anything. We really feel that we look at every individual student anyway, and we're looking at a school that really focuses on the STEM areas, like I mentioned. So we're really focused on the academic side of things. As far as a student reporting that, obviously that's their choice. We would like to see that because it allows us to do more types of outreach, connecting them with people either on campus or alumni and things like that. And that's something that we've seen a downward trend in students reporting that. And I've noticed that just within my own territory, more and more each year decide not to, but it really is helpful for admissions with surveys that we do. And again, connecting them with people that they may be interested in learning more information about Michigan Tech, so they really can make a more informed decision. And if they end up on Michigan Tech's campus to be there as a student, then they already know who those groups are, those people are that they can go to and really start off their career well with us right on campus. So that's about all I have, because it really doesn't really change a whole lot for us.
Yep, but still great point and great data to consider that you've already seen kind of a decrease in that. So thank you, Tom. Selena.
Mine will be nice and short and sweet, so no. Everyone is always admitted still and will always be.
Thank you. All right, Lindsay.
Same here. Yeah, no, it's same here. That's such a perfect way to put it, Tom. We're gonna look at every single person. Yeah, no, it has not changed. It has not changed how we do things here.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, and Terry.
Okay, well, I'll go for it then, I guess. Um, has it changed? Yeah. I mean, to be just being very candid, we never um, offered admission strictly on the basis of race or ethnicity, but part of our desires as a campus is to be able to recruit a diverse campus. And so part of that fabric of diversity, along with many others, is race and ethnicity. And so that was a, I won't say it's a factor, but it was a consideration in how we understood a student's background and what they could bring to the class. We no longer have it. And so that's something that, while unfortunate, everyone here probably that's sitting in, not just on this panel, but in this session, understood that this was coming. And we saw this coming a couple of years ago when it started filtering its way through the appellate courts, and we saw that it was likely coming to the Supreme Court. And so we were getting ourselves prepared, for the worst case scenario, hoping that we wouldn't have to implement that worst case scenario. And um, maybe this is my opinion, but I think it's an opinion and shared by many others. We the court didn't go as far as they could have. And so, like you mentioned in the lead up to this question, it doesn't affect the recruitment. It doesn't affect scholarships. It doesn't affect some of those other elements. It's specifically in the admission process, and who knows what future cases may decide. I know the service academies were not a part of this decision, and so they still get to use that. And I'm hoping that future courts will be able to consider that broadly for the rest of our campuses. And so yeah, it's affected us. But some of the things you mentioned, like with respect to the essay, so we didn't change our essays. In fact, our legal department, they believe that if if those essays were to ever find themselves in court as a legal challenge, that they wouldn't hold up. I don't have a JD. I have no idea if that would be true, but they've kept us out of trouble. So I guess I have to listen to that somewhat. But that said, like I I encourage, especially when I'm speaking to audiences that have students of diverse perspectives, to talk about their lived experiences in their essay. And frankly, that's probably not much different from the advice that we would have done before then, because that brings the totality of them as a student and really kind of fills out their character and who they are and what they'll have to contribute to a dynamic, kind of vibrant environment. Um, and even the Chief Justice Roberts' opinion very explicitly mentioned that the essay is where a student may be able to talk about their lived experiences in a way that's compelling. And so I think that's something to consider. That said, again, going back to one of my first, and I apologize if this is like a little soapbox soliloquy or whatever, but my colleagues didn't take a lot of time, so I'm going to take all of it. Um, uh, uh, Access is important. And unfortunately, students that may need that type of guidance, frankly, don't have it. Um, I understand I'm not in the state of Michigan, I'm in the state of Indiana, where that is really never been more apparent. Indiana is ranked 50 out of 50 in student to counselor ratio. We are at one counselor for every, or excuse me, counselor for every approximately 700 students in the state of Indiana. That is horrible. I know that some schools have other faculty and staff assigned to that kind of college guidance process, but the reality is that's not the case in our state. And so it's hard for us to expect that out of the essay when, as a public school in our own state, that's just not something that's going to be offered a lot. And so, all that said, we can't expect for that to happen in every instance. And so, what we've done is kind of shifted a little bit, as much as we can, to be able to discover and understand a student's perspective through other elements of their application. So many of you are probably familiar with College Board landscape data. And so if for those that are not, essentially it gives on a scale of 0 to 100 for every applicant, both their school population and their neighborhood population, basically the adverse effects that they are experiencing as a result of being in either one of those two categories. And so we can at least on a very high level scale be able to understand context. And so we do that. We also look at other cues. Did they apply for a fee waiver? Did they, so kind of the socioeconomic element. And then obviously if they indicate some things in their essays, we try to take those into a little bit more account than maybe what we did last year. So yeah, I think that's it. It makes it more challenging, and we'll see in August what the effect is and what it's going to be, and I anticipate, honestly, we'll have to be better at our jobs. We'll have to be better figuring out how to hunt for and recruit. I hate using that word because we're not sales, but hunt for and attract students from all different types of backgrounds in a more kind of effective way. That's going to be a challenge, at least in our office.
Thank you, Terry. I was really hoping you'd be able to bring some perspective that maybe we are not able to have in Michigan. So really appreciate your thoughts on that topic.
All right, so we are going to talk about test optional policies and practices. I hope we've all heard a lot about test optional, even pre-COVID, but then I think COVID sort of tipped us over the edge there. So just some data. When Samantha and I were at the National College Attainment Network conference, Jenny Rickard from Common App shared some basic stats, which is that only 4% of Common App schools require standardized testing. Obviously, not every single institution in the country uses Common App, but just an interesting data point. And one, I think, just to quell the anxiety and the worries that come up around testing, and kind of back to that idea of like, will I get into a college? Let's put it in perspective, which is that only 4% of Common App schools require standardized testing. So we know that for the most part, we're living in a test optional or a test options landscape moving forward. I think that the evidence is bearing out at this point. So the question is, should students send their scores? This is a case-by-case basis. This is a student autonomy and student choice, ultimately. But some information for you to be aware of. Last week, I was on a webinar. A state university here in Michigan shared last week. They view scores within the context of a student's high school. So if scores are above average for that high school, they would recommend sending scores. The other data point I have heard along in my years of experience is, let's look at the middle 50% reported for accepted students. And if you're above that mid 50%, send them in. Obviously, we know as it becomes more test optional, then then schools are likely receiving higher scores if you continue to use that mid 50 metric as your deciding point. But then I would also point out to consider national demographic scores. So if you search for the SAT or ACT, you can find score breakdowns by race, by gender. And so that can also be a helpful data point in a counselor rec to be able to say the student is in the top 2 percentile for test takers of students with similar identities to them. So just kind of pointing out that that national data as well. But again, the specifics are going to matter case by case for students. And then the other obvious data point is, like, certain majors are going to require testing, or certain programs within schools may require it, whereas others do not. And then keep in mind that GPA may exempt or require testing. So some schools say if you have a 3.5 or higher, completely test optional. If you are below a certain GPA, we'd like to see testing, or schools. So the details are going to matter. So I will open it up to our panelists and Samantha to guide that conversation on question number 4.
Again, I know this might be a pretty quick answer for many, but What are your institution's current requirements for testing? Are there any majors that specifically require it? Are there any scholarships that require it or that they can be considered for based on test scores? And we will start with Lindsay.
I was about to say, I recognize that building. So we are test optional, and I kind of true test optional. We do not need to have a test for any kind of admissions decision, and we don't require it for like merit-based awards. We made that shift. I mean, yeah, back in pandemic, right when the pandemic hit, because we definitely did used to require the test. And I think we had a lot of conversations with our academic our academic committee, and making sure that we were doing other things to supplement. So we actually pre-pandemic, before the pandemic, and COVID and everything, we didn't require an essay. And we only required transcripts and test scores. And so once the pandemic hit, we just knew that obviously testing was going to be bumped back. So we decided to change our requirements to transcripts required and an essay required, and starting to look at more of that. And I'll say, since we started to do that, I've been really loving that method more. I have just recently been looking over applications, and had somebody had a 4.0, went to a very good school, and they did have send their test, just because students are just still sending it, and it was a lot lower than I would have expected for a 4.0 student. So I really enjoyed seeing that shift, just because I think we can tell so much more from a student's essay and their transcripts, right? And seeing those things, and with how we do things, we see the ebbs and flows, where we're not just looking at that bottom line number. We're digging deep if it is a little lower than we like to see. So when I say all that to say is, like, we are test optional. We have no plans of moving towards requiring them again. But that will be, every year, though, our academic affairs office will kind of reevaluate that, but they have said at least for the next 5 years they don't plan on reevaluating it. So yeah, we don't require the test. We just need transcripts, an application, and an essay for our application process.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Tom.
Thank you. At Michigan Tech, since the pandemic, we went to a way to use test scores for other purposes than admission. To make it simple, if a student has a 3.0 or higher, we do not require test scores, so we're test blind with that. If they are below a 3.0, in most cases, we will ask the students to supply test scores to us to help us make that admissions decision. As far as test scores go, what else do we use them for? We do use them for our automatic merit awards if it helps the student. Again, they don't have to supply that. We've got a chart for just GPA and also a chart for GPA and test scores. And then we also use test scores for math placement. So we might tell a student, you need to get that in because you don't have college level math in high school. And the other thing we'll use it for, since the pandemic, we created kind of a summer bridge program for our engineering programs for students that were in a certain math range for their SAT score. So overall, test blind, but we do use the test scores for other purposes, and we only use it when it helps the student out.
Great, that's great perspective, Tom. Thank you. All right, Terry.
Sorry, couldn't find my mouse. I wish we could be as straightforward as my colleagues, but we're not. So for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, we were test required going forward here, starting for this application year. And then it was decided that we would become test expected, like in July, when we've already communicated to everybody and taken the heat for being test required. So yay, administration. But no, we're test expected. And I know that's probably like it's as close as you can get to test required without becoming test required. So I'll simplify it if I can. I'm very transparent about this. If students are going to apply to our most competitive majors, to be able to be most competitive in those competitive majors, they should probably have a test score. And namely, nursing, professional flight, engineering, computer science, data science. If a student is applying to any of those programs, they should probably apply using test scores. And being very candid, again, I try to be as transparent as I can. I was very, very intimately involved in how we go about our review process. It's a very small percentage, and so I would say if a student, even if he or she is not above our middle 50%. I think that's really that guidance that was given kind of in prelude to this question. This is something I've heard often, and I think it's in most cases is actually probably good guidance. But even if they're somewhere beyond that 50% range, I would encourage them to submit test scores just to make sure that they're most competitive and there are no questions about it. I just reviewed a student yesterday whose test score might indicate that she is not competitive, but the rest of her application was extraordinarily competitive, and I gave her absolutely my highest recommendation, and move on to maybe some honors beyond scholarship. So so we're not requiring it. It is expected, but it is, I would say, if I were to give a percentage of it, it is less than 10%, maybe 5% of our actual review. But again, if I can be more transparent and add more gray to this discussion, those competitive majors, you just want to have it to remove all discussion and doubt as to your students' competitiveness into those programs. So I know I probably just created more questions than I did answer, but I answered as best as I possibly could.
That's why we wanted you on here, Terry. We know you got a lot of unique perspectives going on there, so we really appreciate it. All right, and Selena, I promise there are more exciting questions for Selena, but love to hear.
You are good, and I'm glad that we can just spend a minute or two just kind of chatting about it. So of course we are not required for testing. However, if students do have their test scores, it does help them along in the admissions process, right? So we do have 2 placement tests still for English and math for students coming into the college. In terms of testing, if they have an SAT or ACT score, then they don't have to complete our English placement test. So it's one less test for them to have to do, which most students are appreciative of. If they send us one of those scores, we're going to use that to directly place them into an English class. They're not going to be allowed to then take our English placement test if they don't necessarily like where they got placed. Okay, so that is one thing. We haven't really had many students, I guess maybe care, or it's not too big of a deal for them where they're placed. But some students, feel a type of way if they don't get placed into English 101, things like that. So if your student is concerned, have them reach out to us. We can ask them, what's your score, and this is where you'll be placed in case they're worried. If they would really rather not submit their test score and just take the placement test, then we say just don't submit it, because if we have it, we're going to use it, right? Just kind of how the system is working at this moment. So, but if they never took the test, then that's okay. We have them, we have the placement test for them to take. And then for math, we don't use any direct placement. Math is just one of those subjects where we're just going to make every student take our math placement test if they have to take a math class, unless they have some AP credit coming in or something like that, where they might, if they already have college credit for math, that's the only way. And current, like recent college math credit, not from a couple years ago, is the only way that they'll be able to bypass that math placement test. So optional, but still, useful if the students have already taken it, which of course most in Michigan have. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Selena.
All right. All right. Second to last topic. College affordability. College is expensive. We know college is expensive, no matter what school you're looking at. But to get the lay of the land, this just came out from a College Board trend in college pricing and student aid report that was released on November 1st. This is hot off the presses. If you want to nerd out on some charts, go Google that one because it had some fascinating things. There were charts that also like accounted for inflation and all of that jazz. My nerd flag is showing. But I will leave you with this visual, which I find just to be an interesting one because as we all feel that college is expensive, the data is actually showing us that things are decreasing ever so slightly. But as our favorite memes would say of like in this economy, it doesn't really feel like it often. But wanted to just get the lay of the land here in terms of private, nonprofit, 4-year schools nationally. The average published tuition and fees, so that does not include room and board, that does not include the estimates for books, miscellaneous, all that stuff, is $41,540. Your public 4-year in-state is $11,260. And your public 2-year in-district school is $3,990. So again, I think we are just seeing some widening financial inequality in America too, and that's playing out how the expenses are being felt by students and families. So the average income increased by 65% for the top quintile in the last 30 years, but only 27% for the lowest quintiles of families. So when we talk about college affordability, the context of the student and family really matters and really shapes how that feels. And then let's look at it nationally versus locally. So Michigan ranks number 6 for having the highest average tuition and fees at public 4-year institutions. So we are above that $11,260 as a state average. But then on the other end of the spectrum, Michigan ranks number 31 for highest average tuition and fees at public 2-year institutions. So I present those with just to let you know the lay of the land there. And then we will kick it over to our panelists.
So we know college is expensive. But how is your institution getting creative and helping students and families afford it? Or do you have any go-to lines or ways of talking about it to justify the investment in higher education? And we will start with Terry.
I love how we picked the out-of-state person to talk about tuition. No, it's all good. Believe it or not, this is actually a point of pride for our campus and for our university. So yes, it is expensive, and to the point made on the previous slide, and I love it, is a great kind of like introduction to the conversation. It's relative to individual families. What may seem like a moderate sacrifice to one family isn't to another, and is completely out of the question for a third family. And so I always enter with those thoughts in mind, because you can say a number and that means so many different things. But our institution has been incredibly creative, and an entire hour session could go onto how we were able to do that. But I'll summarize it by the result in saying that our tuition has been frozen for Indiana residents, non-residents, and international students for each of the past 12 years. So yeah, despite all that's going on in our world, economically, socially, health, pandemic, our tuition has remained the same through all of it. And there have been some sacrifices, but honestly, the student experiences has remained, I will say better. I won't even say the same. It's the quality of education on our campus has been enhanced. And so, again, we recognize it's going to be a sacrifice for some students, and also a lot of students who may get merit aid from other institutions don't get merit aid from us. To put numbers to it for Michigan students, the total cost of attendance, so room and board, everything, pizza, laundry, travel back home, is right just over 41,000. Total cost of attendance, everything. And again, I know that number is significant, but like I primarily travel and talk to students in California and Bay Area specifically, and they're like, "Oh, that's what I'm going to pay to go down the street." And so that's something that I think we point uh, pride to. In addition to that, for again, this is in-state. I apologize for this, but for Indiana residents that make under 80,000 a year, those students don't have to take out any loans. We'll take care of them financially through various grants and aid packages, and so they'll be taken care of. Again, I know this is an out-of-state audience, so that really may not resonate as much, but maybe some reason to move to Indiana. I don't know, but so we keep that in mind. Again, I feel like every answer has this from me, which is true. Access is really important to us. And part of that, yes, is the academic piece, but if you can't afford it, you can have straight A's and no one care. And I'm a beneficiary of that. I came from first generation, very low income family. I came to Purdue and don't have a ton of debt to be able to speak from it. So this is kind of just a thing for our campus, and I think I'm a success story of that.
Thank you, Terry. Tom.
Thank you. This has been something that it's been at Michigan Tech, the way we're modeled. We've been working with students and families for a very long time individually as far as the affordability. And another part of it is that we do focus a lot on the STEM areas. So part of the discussion is, as you're going through school, you have a high probability of getting an internship or a co-op with the company to really make some really good money over the summer or over 8 months. And that when you start off, you will likely have somewhere around 65 or 70,000 for a starting salary. For a lot of students, it's really, I think, a big thing to put that as part of the equation. What is it going to end up costing me over the course of 4 or 5 years? What am I going to start with? Our students, they really do well as far as paying back their loans. Our loan default rate is very low. So those are some things that I'll mention, but the main thing is that we really want to work with the family. We want to work with the student and the family to see how affordable it can be. So my main message is get through the whole financial aid process with each of the schools that you're interested in, whether it's private, public, it doesn't matter. Get through to find out what you're actually going to cost. And then I like to work with the students individually because I have a direct line into our financial aid office. So I know our director, and we also created a new position about a year ago where we have a person in a hybrid role where he works between admissions and financial aid. So I talk to him on a weekly basis. And especially during the spring months, as we're getting close to decision time, I work a lot with him. And by me working closely with these families, I can learn more about them. And they tell me things they might not be able to reflect in their financial aid process through the FAFSA. So I can work with our financial aid office and see if there's any other types of aid that we can give that student, whether it's grant money through Michigan Tech or through sponsored scholarships. So I think that's the biggest thing for us, is that we work really closely with the families and just kind of making sure that they get through that whole process before they figure out what it's going to cost before they start ruling out schools, because they just don't know how much it's going to cost until, really later on in the spring in a lot of cases.
Thank you, Tom. Selena.
Neat. So of course, GRCC community college. So we definitely think of ourselves as pretty affordable for our students. But we are still, trying different things to being able to continue to help students, especially because so many of our students go on to our four-year college partners campuses, and if we can help them avoid student loans while they're with us, at least, perhaps before they go, or maybe if they can, get a lot of things with us that they can save before going over to the four-year college, And I think it's really just kind of showing students how much help is out there already, you know, in terms of like the TIP program, in terms of like all of the different Promise Zone scholarships that are across the state, you know, just utilizing so many of those just automatic funds that they're getting just from being where they live, or, you know, circumstances of growing up and things like that. I think is important to being able to just show them, hey, you know, you have all of these resources available. You just gotta maybe ask about it, you know, take advantage of it. You know, sometimes it's better, you know, and um, you know, I'm a first generation college student that didn't really know anything about anything, especially financial aid and paying for college. I went straight to a 4-year college, and I'm always very upfront with students, you know. I took out many loans, but that was my own decision to get myself through college, because that was my goal, right? I wanted a college degree, and that was the way to do it. But I'm always very adamant about telling them, you know, because I didn't know about it, you know, there could have been a lot of other ways for me to lessen that burden on myself. And so it's really just, I just want students to be aware, you know the cost of all of the different colleges that are out there, and just pick the one, you know, that's going to be best financially, and just kind of working through that. So, you know, all of those different things that are outside of GRCC, of course, that students can access to help make it more affordable, which is amazing. We do have scholarships at the college as well. We don't have automatic scholarships, like my colleagues. That's always a big question that students ask, you know, do we get automatic scholarships? And no, you don't, but we do have over 400 different scholarships available for students to apply for, all through one application, and you just have to apply to the college to start that process. So, yeah, I guess that's a little bit about GRCC, but I think just showing students the big picture and kind of letting them see those numbers, because I think that's where a lot of them just don't realize, you know, like, see the big picture, and then, you know, is going to a CC first the better way for you, or is going, if you going to get, you know, a lot more scholarships going straight to that 4-year college. So I think we can all help each other and help students make those good decisions together.
Thank you, Selena. And Lindsay.
Yeah, oh man, everybody just brought up so many amazing points, because yeah, the financial side of things is such a huge part of any family and students college process. And like my colleagues too, I mean, we really get to work with our students kind of on an individual basis, which is really wonderful. So we, you know, I think especially being a private school, private immediately has people turning around and walking away from me. And so I use a lot of, I'm, as the longer I've been in admissions, the more and more the more honest I get with families, of, you know, because I've just seen and talked and had through a lot of different conversations. And so I'm pretty honest with families about my experience, because I'm comfortable doing that. You know, I say this, fortunately / unfortunately, my parents made too much money. And so I did not qualify for, you know, need-based money, but I did have a family. And again, very fortunate enough that I had family who, my dad was a first generation student, and was able to you know, we learned from my parents, and we walked through the loan process. And because of the scholarships Aquinas gave me, I only had to take out my federal loan, which was very great, because yeah, private schools can get a really bad rap, but we give away some pretty great scholarships as well. So and our students do get automatic like merit awards if they do qualify, obviously within our kind of a spectrum. And then we do also have, if students have a 3.2 or higher, they get invited to our Spectrum of Scholarships competition, where they can come and compete for close to 130 scholarships, including a full tuition and room scholarship, 4 full tuition scholarships. So, and we have adjusted that GPA over the years. In the very beginning, it used to be, when I first started working, was 3.5 or higher, and we decided to again make it a more accessible, and did lower that requirement, to just, you know, encourage more people to be able to participate. We also last year we decided to start implementing a visit scholarship. So if students visited, they got $1,000. Last year we also got to expand our alumni scholarship or legacy scholarship to include not just parents but siblings who've graduated and grandparents who've graduated. So that was a change we decided to make last year. And then this year for the fall 2024-2025 academic school year, we are doing a program called the Aquinas Assurance Program. So we will be providing full tuition, including fees to first-year students that meet some different requirements. They're eligible for maximum federal Pell, eligible for the full Michigan Achievement Scholarship, eligible for the full Michigan Tuition Grant, graduate from high school in the spring of 2024 to come in fall 2025, and then have a 3.0 or better on a standard kind of 4.0 GPA scale. So that's something that we have done. We are just talking about it more, and kind of putting it putting it out there and getting students more access to that kind of affordability information. I think, with I love in the question, like go-to lines, obviously talking about all those amazing resources, but I think at the end of the day, I just get to be really honest with students about my experience and my friends' experience. And we also do offer financial aid appeals. I will literally Google for students what their community foundation is and send them the link to their scholarships. So that is a really big benefit of it being a smaller school and being able to work with students on kind of a more individualized basis too, and meeting them where they're at and finding those things for them if possible. So those are just some of the things we've always kind of done, but have been able to kind of expand on that a little bit more in the past year or so.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So our last topic is one that, just based on my own experience as a former college and career counselor, I probably could do like 4 whole webinars on. However, I will not. But if you have not heard it yet, you will now hear it. FAFSA is changing pretty dramatically in some ways, in other ways not. However, headline, it's not available yet. And there are going to be some really key changes to it. So one of those big key changes is entering the information. So in the past, a student could log in and then they could just seamlessly go through student and parent information by clicking next. That is not going to be an option anymore. Each contributor must have an FSA ID. If you're old school, the PIN is no more. The FSA ID is the thing. So each contributor needs to have an FSA ID. Each contributor can only enter their own information. We may look the other way if somebody has somebody's username and password. However, technically you need to log in as the other contributor. I don't recommend that. I'm just know that we all do that. And then you do not need to use the data retrieval tool anymore. Part of these changes is so that the tax data information is automatically moved over. Headline here is also the estimated family contribution, that EFC, is changing into the student aid index. And so the student aid index can be a negative number to represent a student's significant need. So if a student sees a negative number and they're like, what's that mean? It just means that you may be eligible for more financial aid, but it's a representation of your family's financial need. It's going to be in flux until the launch. The date, as far as I know, has not been released yet. But the last I had heard was probably looking like December 21st. So still not even December 1st. When we went to a conference with the Better FAFSA federal student aid folks who were presenting, they strongly recommended that counselors follow them on LinkedIn. That is in their strategy for communication, because they know that counselors use LinkedIn and students most likely do not. So kind of that first wave of communication will come out there. There are amazing webinars on their website. It doesn't always look the fanciest and it's not always the easiest to navigate, but we will share those links with everyone, and those webinars are your best preview at what you can see right now while you wait for it to be released. We will also share these tools, the toolkit link. And then one of the things, we had a conversation with the president of MACAC prior to today's conversation. And she really reiterated that MCAN, we're using all the acronyms, MCAN has certified FAFSA specialists. So they sponsored training for people throughout the state of Michigan to be certified FAFSA specialists who then are available and sort of like ready to deploy to schools to help with FAFSA submissions. So we are looking into how to get a list of who those people are, or how we could share those contacts with counselors so that you know who to go to. But there are folks who have been training this fall to be able to do that. And then just some things for you to be aware of. There's some legislation within the state of Michigan. SB 463 was introduced. It's a universal FAFSA policy. So this is sort of a national trend that we are seeing. Louisiana was the first state to implement a universal FAFSA policy. So sort of, in other words, this is saying, like, in order to graduate from high school, a student needs to submit a FAFSA. And Louisiana saw, understandably, increases in FAFSA filing rates, but they also saw increases in high school graduation and post-secondary enrollment. So a lot of the conversation around that universal FAFSA is around the idea of, if you remove the FAFSA as a barrier, provide support for students to submit the FAFSA, then post-secondary enrollment, whether it's at 2-year apprenticeships, 4-year colleges, increases. So just want to make sure that's on your radar. We had 3 beautiful questions for our panelists. We are running tight on time, which is okay, to be expected. So we are going to zoom in on question 7 for our panelists. I'll let Samantha facilitate it, but question 7 is the one that we're really focusing on.
Yes, and again, thank you so much to our panelists. You've shared such great information so far. And again, we know that this FAFSA is all in flux anyway, so we don't exactly know what this will look like. But we would like to hear from you all as, students are starting to apply and get accepted to schools. How do you anticipate that this, change in FAFSA and not being able to apply until December is going to affect your financial aid packaging timeline due to this delay? And this is the beautiful campus of Kenyon College, which is Catherine's alma mater. So we'll just start with Selena for this one.
Okay, well, to be honest, I haven't really had the opportunity to kind of talk to our financial aid office and see what their thoughts are in terms of how this is going to work. I'm learning new things, so I appreciate the slide before, because I really feel pretty clueless in terms of all the new FAFSA things that are coming out. But
I think everyone does. It's okay.
yeah, I'm sure we all are kind of feeling the same thing. I don't think the timeline is going to shift. I've just, we've had FAFSA happening. We used to have FAFSA in January all the time, and we'd all still get our financial aid packages out at some point. So I don't know if it's going to affect it. I don't think so. I feel like our FA offices are pretty used to going with the flow and all of these changes that are always happening in their world and everything. So I don't think so, but we're always here to help. And especially GRCC, we want to help all students figure this out, right? No matter if they're coming to the college or not. We have a lot of resources. So I think that's just the most important thing, is even if your students aren't considering GRCC or thinking of us as a backup option or something like that, we are still more than happy to help fill out these. So you can send your students to us. They don't need appointments. They can bring their stuff with them and we can help them fill it out. So
thank you, Selena. Lindsay?
Yeah, it's definitely shifting ours, because we have done for the past however many years since it did change to October, our goal had always been to get our first batch of financial aid awards out before we hit Christmas break. So obviously we cannot promise people, we definitely can't promise people that will not be happening. So, I think we are we're just kind of on alert, essentially, of when, will be told it's open, because again, out of being very, very honest with our students, of course, we've been told December. We do not know what day in December. So I've been very honest with families to say that legally it has to be open before January 1st. So I've had parents pick up on that and go, so technically December 31st. And I go, yes, like technically, yes. So we've just been really honest. And I've even started to tell students, like, just be on the lookout. You're going to get 100 emails the minute that the FAFSA opens, letting you know that the FAFSA is open from all of the schools that you're looking at. So again, I've just been really, really honest with families. So I think our goal, I would have to talk to our financial aid office on this, but I think our goal would be to have it out, our first batch out probably in the middle of February, because that will actually be after both of our competitions that I mentioned, because we have one in December and one at the end of January. Again, that is probably a very lofty goal. It could be sooner, it could be a little later, but it's definitely shifting our timeline for sure. And I know my director of financial aid even has said that if it opens while we are on, our staff is on winter break, she'll be coming in and working on that and trying to organize that a little bit. So yeah, definitely shifting some things around. But just in general, I have been very honest. We have been very honest and very transparent with our families, and just kind of saying, like, we're all in this together, in this shift and in this change. But like Selena said, I have been mentioning to families as well that, like, back in my day, it was January to March, so when it was open. So, been trying to put some things in perspective as well. And I'm just trying my best to be able to do that. Again, just being honest with families.
Thank you, Lindsay. Tom.
Thank you. I think the main thing is that we all want to help families in our financial aid offices, and us as admissions people, we want to help those families. So again, this used to be something we did in January and February and cranked everything out in March. So for us, we're anticipating not really a big shift from last year. We're looking at mid-January to late January for the first batch that we're going to be rolling out. So it'll be interesting to find out when the financial aid process does start with FAFSA. So I think the sooner it happens, then we'd be able to pretty comfortably say mid-January, but kind of depends on when it all rolls out. And I think what the other reps are saying here is that, we're really trying to work with families, be transparent, and say we're kind of in this together is probably the best thing to tell them, and that we really want to help them.
Thank you. And Terry.
Yeah, kind of what Lindsay said, depending on if we're talking about December 1st or December 31st, that's a big difference, but we're aiming for end of March.
Thank you so much. And we know, again, this is in flux. There will be so much more information coming out, and we will be sure to share it as we learn of it as well.
All right. We have less than 5 minutes. So I think we are going to call an audible, which is we will hold on question and answers from the audience, just so that we can wrap up. But I would love to give a virtual round of applause to our panelists. So if you can use the little clapping on your Zoom, go for that. If you want to drop a brief comment of appreciation in the chat, you can go for that. And then if you have questions specifically, please send them to Samantha or myself in our follow-up, and we will get you either directly connected to one of the representatives who is here today, or we can get answers and send them out to the whole group. So at this time, if you want to drop your appreciation in the chat, we'll give everyone a moment to catch their breath. I'm going to turn the recording off, and then our panelists are welcome to drop out. So thank you so much, Selena, Tom, Lindsay, and Terry, for joining us this morning. I will just say for myself, I don't want to speak on behalf of the others, but I hope it feels this way for others. You all just brought a really human aspect to this work, and we are very appreciative of how willing you are to share your processes, share your insights, and as many of you said, to connect with students one-on-one to do what's right by them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Did you mute?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. So, in the interest of time, just so you know, we had some questions planned to debrief. We will move forward, but I would encourage everybody in your notes, in your drive home, however you process your information, capture for yourself something you learned, something you'd like to implement, and something you're curious to learn more about. Samantha and I are always trying to make our sessions as relevant to your needs. So if you think of something you're curious to learn more about or help you need with implementation, let us know. We are happy to try to build that into future sessions as well. So speaking of additional resources, we will share all of these out in an email to everyone. The one I want to talk about is the MACAC free membership for school counselors. So this year, MACAC had funding to be able to provide a free membership for all public school counselors in the state of Michigan. So that's an opportunity for more professional development, more conversations like today's, and just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And then we will send links to all of these, including the Better FAFSA toolkit, which will give you resources to implement all of the lovely changes that are coming. And then a quick preview of other opportunities provided by our team here at Kent ISD. So Samantha is leading some train the trainer style sessions. December 7th will be interviewing skills. And then February, we're looking at social media. So that's how do you teach students to be able to have that positive online presence, and then some networking towards career development as well. We also co-facilitate our career readiness network. Our next 5 sessions will be virtual. So we invite folks to join those if you would like to talk more about sort of that intersection between college and career. And then there are a couple other opportunities led by folks on our team that you can see at the bottom there. And our next college prep session will be February 13th. We're going to be focusing on minority serving institutions. So HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, and historically Black colleges and universities, as well as other related institutions there. March, we will do some case study reviews. And then in May, we will specifically zoom in for our K-8 folks. So if you are a high school counselor and you would like your elementary or middle school counterparts to be aware of that one, please feel free to send them the registration links. And then the QR code, you can sign up for our newsletters. One of them is called Cut and Paste, and our hope is that you can literally cut and paste opportunities out to your students. And all these PD opportunities will also be advertised in our newsletters. Samantha, anything else for me to add? Okay, so headline is you will receive a lot more resources there. Our door is open. If we can help get you connected to other folks, let us know. And thank you for being here today.